here tonight, we are going to have a debate, the debate of the century. It's on a very important topic for so many of us. That is the topic of immigration. In this debate, we will cover different subtopics, all of which will have to do with, in some way, immigration, as well as 287G, which many of you are most likely aware of. And so, this is going to be a phenomenal debate. We would like to thank you for being here. And we would also like to say, in memory of Charlie Kirk, the Salisbury University College Republicans really threw this debate in honor of Charlie Kirk. Given that Charlie Kirk was a Christian and valued free speech, the Salisbury University College Republicans also values free speech, and that's why we're here tonight, so that we can have a free speech debate and we can get to the heart of this issue, the heart of this topic of immigration and the 287G program. So thank you all for coming out. The debate participants for this evening are going to be two of the greatest minds that Salisbury University has to offer to you all. And with that being said, we are now going to introduce them. First and foremost, we are going to have a left-wing college professor who works here at Salisbury University. He's a teacher. I'm sure he's a professor for some of the people here in this room today. His name, of course, is Dr. Joe Venosa.
You said my name right. Let's go home.
Sir? Yeah. And now we will introduce our second debate participant. He is the president of the Maryland State College Republicans. That is Colin McEvers.
You care?
Still care? I could sit here.
Okay.
I could sit here.
Thank you for
Thank you,
coming.
guys.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, we will have 5-minute opening statements followed by 4 different 10-minute discussion-styled back-and-forth debates. I, Pax Garcia is my name. I'm an Orthodox Christian as well as a student here at Salisbury University. I will be the moderator for this debate, so thank you all for having me. So with that said, let's start with our 5-minute opening statements. Dr. Joe Venosa.
I'm the leadoff here.
Oh, I'll start.
I'll start.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, Colin McEvers is going to start us off.
Okay, well, we don't have a podium, so I'm just going to wing it. It's really great to see everyone out here. There are dozens of people. I think it's really emblematic that we do have a lot of political engagement and interest on this campus. Of course, we're ranked the #1 for the most politically disengaged campus in the country. But I think this proves otherwise. So I'm going to start my opening statement here that I've prepared, and it will be about the 287G program and illegal immigration. Law and order lies at the foundation of any functional society. Without laws to keep human nature in check and without the strength required to enforce these rules, we would live in a state of abject chaos and misery. Thomas Hobbes correctly theorized that human nature is, in essence, brutish, nasty, and short. A strong centralized government to enforce laws with an iron fist, what he called the Leviathan, is crucial. Now, we look upon this way of thinking in the modern world. We Americans are very privileged. Me, you, the people at this table, many of our grandparents and great-grandparents, to have lived in a society governed by laws. Too often we take for granted our privilege to safely live in a country where folks are punished for murdering, looting, and other such nefarious activities. In my opinion, which I have developed from a number of conversations with several colleagues through the years, there are many college students who are not immensely grateful for this privilege that we have of law and order. Some think that the execution of certain laws is too harsh. Weakness overrides strength, and purported compassion undermines what our forefathers fought to secure for us all. The extent of this problem is no more clear than in the case of illegal immigration and deportations. There are so many people who believe that the activities of, say, immigration, custom, and enforcement are morally reprehensible. I'm sure there are a lot of people on campus. I'm sure a lot of you think that. It's good that we have some dialogue and some disagreement there. 78% of liberals, for instance, according to Pew Research, view ICE unfavorably. My rhetorical question, however, is, should we revert to a system like that under the Biden administration in which millions of undocumented immigrants flowed into the country every year? Apparently, this system was more compassionate as the United States opened up her arms to foreigners throughout the world. It's more compassionate, but was it a better system? Not in my opinion. Firstly, a greater presence of undocumented immigrants in a community puts a greater strain on local and state governments. In Maryland, illegal immigrants can receive some forms of Medicaid coverage. In Wycomico, non-English speaking undocumented families must be accommodated with costly translators by our public school system. Impoverished residents, both natural-born and legal immigrants who came here the right way, who waited decades to get into this country, years to get into the United States, to become a citizen. It's an immense privilege. They are in dire need of services. They're now paying more taxes for the sake of illegal immigrants, many of whom do not pay taxes, creating a fiscal drain of many thousands of dollars per person. How is that fair? I don't know. That's not fair to me. I don't think that's fair at all for the American citizens who are both natural-born and legal immigrants. Secondly, consider how much drug smuggling, human trafficking, and other illegal activities occur in the context of illegal border crossing. Back to the Hobbesian point, there was a lot more horrendous crime occurring during the compassionate, all-loving Biden administration than there is under the supposedly authoritarian Trump administration. In my opinion, strength, ladies and gentlemen, has a way of solving big problems. Thirdly, legal immigrants sometimes must wait years for U.S. citizenship, as I touched on before. How are we to justify giving out amnesty passes to those who cut ahead in line? We cannot. If we do not enforce the law, there is no law. If there is no law regarding immigration, our country would be flooded with millions of disadvantaged foreigners starting tomorrow, people who want to come to the United States. There are millions throughout the world who would like to be here, and we wouldn't be able to, it's not sustainable. No borders mean no nation. We do not have the size, capacity, nor resources for the world's poor. Unfortunately, we do not. We can barely take care of our own citizens, which you can see if you go through West Baltimore, if you go through parts of Salisbury, if you take a stroll through where I grew up in Glen Burnie. There are a lot of people who are homeless, American citizens, who we cannot even provide for. So I support the 287G program. In Wycomico, it entails a proposed cooperation, a memorandum of agreement between the county and ICE to allow correction facility officers in the detention center to serve and execute warrants to illegals who are already jailed. Fundamentally, it is an extra tool in the toolbox, and that's the topic of this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin McEvers, for that opening statement. We are now going to hear from Dr. Joe Venosa.
Thanks. I'm going to do the stroll, too. You good?
Wonderful.
You got some sweat there.
I know.
Step back a few. Hide the face, right? I got you. All right, thanks. So, and this is, of course, what happens all the time. You prepare for something. Colin was kind enough to ask me to do this last night. I had a whole bunch of notes. Of course, printer's not working in the lab, so Venosa luck strikes again. Just while we get into this, call me Joe, because at this point we're two citizens, right? I mean, we're not in a debate necessarily about the historical record. So I'm going to call myself Joe. You call me Joe. I'll call you Colin.
Okay, cool.
Cool. All right. So, Colin, you mentioned a lot of important points, right, in regard to the nature of immigration, the nature of a border, what purpose does a nation serve. These are all really important historical points, and they're points that basic civic debate should have. So I appreciate the invitation, because campus at its core is the ultimate marketplace of ideas. If we can't talk about issues here, this place doesn't have any function. So I commend everybody for coming out, regardless of where you feel on the issue, left, right, center, wherever. For the record, depending on who you talk to, I don't know how left-wing I am, and that's part of the kind of issue. I think sometimes when we put labels on each other, it doesn't really help. For example, I've generally voted for a Democratic candidate for president for most of my life. I was a registered Democrat for most of my life. I was a Republican for the last 3 cycles because in Wicomico County, there's really no Democratic Party that operates. And now I'm an independent. So where you want to put me kind of varies. But I think that's important to what I'm going to try to talk about tonight, because I actually want to get away from the labels and talk about the nature of the issues. And my view, just from where I'm standing, is I view my thoughts as common sense, right? That's where I'm coming from. So that's how I see myself. You may differ, but hear me out. First off, you said that unchecked immigration can lead to a system of chaos and disorder. I really thought about that a lot because I have a 9-year-old at home. So I understand chaos and disorder. And I'm grateful that he let me out to talk about these things tonight. But I have to say, it is a very complicated issue. One of the things that we hope to get into is the fact that the United States, like many countries, is founded on certain ideas and certain principles. But one of the things that makes it very challenging is that the nature of immigration in this country is actually something that's been prone to a lot of swings and changes. Because realistically, if you actually read the Constitution, there's no real solidified policy on immigration. There really isn't. If you go to Section 1, Article 8, there's a little bit of language about naturalization, but nothing much about enforcement, which means we're at the whim of laws, we're at the whim of public opinion, we're at the whim of political leadership. And so what I'm going to try to do, hopefully in our talk tonight, is maybe touch upon the context of some of these issues and touch upon their overall importance. I want to say something about 287G, because Colin made the point, in sort of national terms, right? His argument is, why do we need to enforce this program? And this is a program that has been around since 1996, believe it or not. It's not a new thing. And there's different kinds of ways the program operates. There's kind of 3 models. I want to say one thing about the nature of that agreement in Wicomico County. It affects almost no one in day-to-day life. What I mean by that is, if the county does adopt the proposed 287G plan, it literally impacts only people that are currently in prison. I want to read specifically what it does just so we have some context. This is the actual policy as drawn up by the county executive of Wicomico County. All this does is it allows the Maryland Department of Corrections to hold someone in prison with an immigration warrant for up to 48 hours after their completion of their reason for detention. That means that if somebody is essentially in prison for something else, they can be held for 48 hours, so ICE performs a background check. So it already is happening within the jails. This doesn't apply to anybody necessarily on the street. Now, I'm going to make an argument later that fiscally it makes no sense, that it's actually going to cost taxpayers a lot of money. But in moral terms, I think it's wrong, because one of the big problems in this local debate on ICE is that it's being framed by certain politicians as something different than what it is. Meaning, politicians both on the left and right are actually taking it, they're taking the comic book version of it, and they're saying it's something when it's actually not.
20 seconds, Joe.
Thank you. We had a meeting downtown a week ago where 150 citizens shown up, many of them Haitian immigrants, who thought the program meant one thing when in reality it means something else entirely. So there's a lot of misinformation out there, and I hope we can address that tonight as we get into a great spirited and vigorous debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Joe Venosa.
Joe,
Or I'll say Joe. Thank you, Joe, so much for that opening statement. We're now going to have 10-minute back and forth discussion style debates. Of course, our topic for tonight, as both debate candidates or debate participants said, is about 287G and immigration. So the first subtopic that we will debate is the following question. Is the 287G program needed in Wicomico County? As the moderator, I'm going to try to keep it at a minimum, and if the discussion gets a little bit rambunctious, I'll try to reel it in. Is that good, Joe?
All good, sir.
Okay, Colin, we good?
Yeah, we good?
Okay, I'll say when we start. We'll have 10 minutes. And begin.
So we were talking about the 287G program and what it is. What is the model that's being implemented in Wycomico County? There are three separate versions of the 287G program. The warrant service model, which is, as Joe described, basically law enforcement officials, people in the correction facility will serve warrants and things like that to the illegal immigrants who have been detained in the jails. And this is the most moderate form of the 287G program. There's also a jail enforcement model, which is basically like, processing people in the jails itself, and also the task enforcement model, which is what a lot of the Haitian immigrants who came to the last county council meeting thought it was, where law enforcement officials gear up in the ICE uniforms, they go out in a bus and they load up illegal immigrants and detain them. And that's not what this program is in Wycomico County. In Wycomico County, basically it's an extra tool in the toolbox for members of the people that are employed with the correction facility and the Department of Corrections in Wycomico. They are able to serve warrants to keep people who have been detained who are illegal immigrants in the jail for a little bit longer, for about 48 hours longer than would otherwise have happened. So it allows them to be transferred over to be dealt with by immigration enforcement, and really it's just an extra measure that people in our county government can use, and law enforcement officials, to keep our communities safe. So that's my perspective on it, and that's why I think it's needed. I don't think it's going to cause excessive tax increases or anything like that. Not that it's not going to be this hugely giant, very, very expensive program. That's not what it's going to be. It's just allowing law enforcement officials to collaborate with ICE, and actually about 76% of Marylanders surveyed in January of 2025 actually agree with something like that happening. So I think it's supported by Maryland residents, and it is something that is needed in Wycomico County.
So the question was, is ICE needed in Wycomico County? And you're putting it in the perspective of the nature of law enforcement. I'm going to speak up. Is this better?
Yeah.
I'm Italian. I'm sorry. I should be my own heritage and be louder. Yeah. So is the ICE 287 program warranted? I think you can make a really good point for public safety. And in fact, I think part of the reason, and you're kind of proving my point, that it's not a partisan issue, right? Because an overwhelming majority of Marylanders do tend to support it.
Yeah.
And the majority of Americans do tend to support the deportation of undocumented immigrants or illegal immigrants or unauthorized immigrants if they have a criminal record. So it's not really a partisan thing. Here's the problem with it. The way it was presented in Wycomico County, and just by a show of hands, who here is from Wycomico County? Is anybody from the county? You don't have to be embarrassed. Just raise your hand. It's okay. I'm from New Jersey, so, it's okay to be from here. Great. All right. Who's not from here? Okay, so the majority. So this is a lot of inside baseball, so I'm going to try to clarify it a little bit. Basically, in this county, we have a politician, the county executive. Her name is Julie Giordano. She kind of presents as an ultra-MAGA Republican, even though she loves getting her picture taken with Wes Moore when he comes here, and she plays both sides and more. But the point here is that she made this announcement in a way, publicly, that was very vague a few months back. And basically she said, we're going to have ICE here, and they're going to bring law and order, and they're going to do the job to get the illegals out of our community. Now, the problem is, you're right. You're absolutely right, Colin. The 287G program that she is trying to push through is very moderate, and it's very minimal. As I said earlier in my statement, it's going to apply to people already in jail. The problem is, when she and a few other politicians were selling it, it freaked out the community. It freaked out people in the immigrant community, especially among the Haitian and Central American community, people from El Salvador, Nicaragua, Venezuela, who live here. And it didn't also just scare undocumented people. A lot of people that showed up at the county meeting last week, right, are residents. They're tax-paying, either they're citizens or they are permanent residents. And the problem is, when you hear the rhetoric at the national level, right, and you see the footage of things that are happening in bigger cities, that's the image that people get when the local politicians also say this. And I don't think that's an accident. I think she's doing it for political red meat for her base. But again, most people, if you look at the facts, know that it's not as sort of authoritarian as somebody might seem. And there's one little irony to this also. The ICE program, 287, was initiated and passed under the Clinton administration in the 90s. So the irony is that for all the talk about being conservative or MAGA, what a lot of maybe right-of-center politicians are doing is they're being Bill Clinton Democrats. So this is why I say that the party labeling doesn't matter, because you got to look at it for the issue. The country has changed in its views on immigration. We might be more divided, but if you look at the history, this is also something that always goes in these different directions. So my concern is that basically when you freak people out about police or law enforcement working with ICE, then immigrants are not going to call the police when there is crime, right? They're going to be afraid to call because they might fear what'll happen if I call the police. Are they going to check my papers or my uncle's papers or my mother's status? And then what that actually could lead to is a distrust and a gap between law enforcement and the community, which actually worsens crime. So that's my perspective on it.
So, Joe, what your point is that Julie Giordano is the one who sold this and misinformed the public and kind of branded it as this thing where people will go out and, round up the people in order to motivate the base, the Republican Party, and did that. And as a result, a lot of people in the community, Haitian immigrants, thought that it would mean that, them and their families would be rounded up and deported and stuff because ICE is kind of like a boogeyman in the national media. What I disagree with is that I think it's mostly these external groups that have sold the narrative, that Julie Giordano is working with ICE and they're going to come out and get you. I don't think it was necessarily Julie's framing of the issue that caused these people in the community to go out and protest against it. I don't think it's Julie
3 minutes, guys.
in her. Okay, 3 minutes. Wonderful. Thank you. Because if you read the press release and if you look into actually what she said, from what I understand, I think she was pretty clear about what exactly the program and the model that it entailed. All you had to do was look at it a little bit, further. I think it's the groups like ACLU and these other, organizations in the community which have sold this narrative and gotten these people fearful and riled up. Sure. And I don't think it's Julie's fault.
Sure. And just for backstory, Colin and I are very involved in local politics. So a lot of the people we're talking about you may never have known or met, but there's a lot of history here. So it is what it is.
A lot of animosity, but me and Joe
hey.
can still sit down and have a little conversation and chat.
That's right. I'm not saying I have animosity, but if she were drowning, I'd throw her a cinder block. Just kidding. No. Here's the problem. You're absolutely right. Julie Giordano specifically, right, has, in many occasions, said this is what the model is. But then she's given interviews where she's given a totally different model approach. She gave different interviews to the Baltimore Sun, to WMDT, to WBOC, and she's given out different press releases with different messages, and that's all on video. But let me tell you what she hasn't done. Do you know how many times she's gone to any local church in an immigrant community or any public meeting with citizens to actually explain what the model is? Do you know how many times she's done that? 0. She has never gone out and explained this to the community. And that's part of the problem. Again, I'm not even saying that the 287 program is inherently wrong. I have my issues with it. But it is not, I agree, it is not something that is fundamentally this boogeyman. But the other side of it then, to that point, is simply this. You said that other groups, the ACLU and other activist groups, are then making hay of it. You're right. And so the extreme left and the extreme right are both using it for their political advantage. And that's how they get clicks, that's how they get fundraising, and that's how they divide us on the real issues. The reality is most Americans have a general common consensus on immigration. I don't think they want any undocumented immigrant who's a criminal here, but at the same time, they also don't want to be sort of put into these boxes where you're very narrowly framing it. So I think she on the extreme right and those on the extreme left are fundamentally doing the community a disservice.
Well, I know we
30
only have 30 seconds left, but what I'll say is that I believe that possibly there might be some framing on both sides. I'll admit that there might be some framing on both sides, much more on the side of the anti-287G. That's my opinion. I think there's much more. And what I'll say is, I think that what Julie's done is actually more beneficial for the community because we're implementing this 287G program in Wycomico County. And, you know, what are these groups doing? They're just fear-mongering. That's their only purpose at this point. So that's what I believe.
All right, that's time. That's 10 minutes. Good job to both of the debate participants.
Thank you.
Can you tell these guys like each other?
We
I think they do.
No,
Forbidden love, you know?
no. All seriousness, and I'll get to this later. He wrote a beautiful article about my son about a year ago. I suggest you read it because, and this is kind of my point. You know, Colin, you know, let's be honest. You're in a political role, right? You're the chair of the Young Republicans of Maryland, right?
Yeah, the College Republican.
College Republicans. So you know you have incentive, right, to be involved in political action.
Definitely. I think we all have incentive as people.
Sure. But you also have. Well, actually, I'm cutting into our time, aren't I? So why don't we
It's
get to the
okay.
question and I'll throw it in later.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Awesome.
So that was our first subtopic. Again, we're going to have 4 subtopics to discuss and debate. So the second subtopic, we're going to ask the question, and this is very connected to the first topic of 287G. How has local government in Wycomico County handled the proposed implementation of the 287G program? Colin, you went
Start with
first?
that one. I know we
go, sir?
you can start first.
Sure. Well, again, let's look at the facts. In July, and just for the record, I'm going to plug this in because it's important. I host a public access show in the community. It's called Open Agenda. It's on PAC 14, which is like your local cable access. It's not the sexiest show, I'll admit, but we report on local issues, and we've looked at this issue since July because we cover local topics. We have looked at the county executive, the sheriff's office, and the county council on these issues. And fundamentally, we have been given different stories by different people at different times. First, the executive proposed that it was going to be a jail enforcement model. Then she backed off. Then she, at one point, said to the local Greater Salisbury Committee, which is like a meeting of business elites, she said, we're not implementing anything at all. Then she came out with an interview in the Baltimore Sun where she clarified and said that it's going to be something that the county council and her will work on. So then she kind of changed the responsibility of it. So we're getting different narratives. And I think that's because politicians in this area are using it for their own benefit because there's an election season coming up already. You know, we're looking at it in a year from now. So politicians are going to do this, right? They're going to throw red meat to their base. Just like you could say people on the extreme left or the extreme right are going to target issues because they're, again, they're good clickbait, they're good engagement. They don't, you know, local government fundamentally is by its nature boring. And so when you have ambitious politicians, they tend to lean into these issues as a way to corral votes. And I think because you've got some local politicians doing this, it's really thrown the community out of whack. And I think we all lose in that situation. So.
In regards to the local handling of the matter, I know that, as you mentioned, it was originally supposed to be a jail enforcement model. And I believe Sheriff Lewis was the first one who wanted to implement it. Usually 287G programs are implemented. It's a cooperation between ICE and the Sheriff's Office. And
Can you be a little bit louder?
yeah, sure thing. However, they ended up deciding, from what I understand, that that was not going to be the right option, the best choice. So they ended up going with the warrant service officer model, which I think, you know, it's something that it can be implemented easily. It's very, very simple to implement, as we have both talked about. It's a very moderate version of the 287G program. At the council meeting last week, there was a work session between the county council and Julie Giordano. And for a little bit more context, the county council and the county executive do not like each other very much.
But
members of the county council and the county executive, they do not get along very well. What I will say is that there have been difficulties in the past in regards to people perceiving that there hasn't been enough transparency, that there hasn't been enough communication. So from what I understood watching the meeting last week, and public access channel, I definitely recommend going on that and you know, checking it out, because you can see a lot about local politics and local things going on. They wanted to get the opinion and determine whether or not the county council's approval was needed to implement the cooperation, the cooperative agreement. So I think it's a work in progress. I don't think we should be, pointing the finger or blaming anyone at the moment. I think it's something that we're all trying to figure out. We're trying to figure out how to implement this. What's necessary? What entities are needed in order to make in order to make it successful? I personally think that it should just be like the county executive making the decision in this particular context because it's the Department of Corrections, which is under the county government, and ICE. I don't think there should be like a necessary vote from the county council. I think there should be deliberation. I think there should be some consultation and public comments, and that's exactly what the work session was intended for and provided last week. So that's my understanding of it.
Yeah. Well, you're actually making my point for me. You're absolutely right. The ICE agreement with the Department of Corrections is legally under the authority of the executive office. That's in our charter. So the council has no legal role in that. In fact, when the executive had this work session where she went to the council, she had written up by her office what's called the Memorandum of Agreement, right? That's the paperwork that ICE and the Department of Corrections would sign. That paper that she submitted fundamentally didn't have any signature lines for the council, which means that there is no role for the council. So you're absolutely right. This is between her and the Department of Corrections. But the fact is, she had said many times in previous weeks that she wanted the council to be a part of it. Then she said, no, it was my authority. Then she flip-flopped on it. And so if you're looking at it from the council's perspective, there's a lot of legal concerns and cost concerns. Now, for the record, the county council is very right-wing Republican dominated too. They're the same party. There are 5 hardcore Republicans and the executive. They're the same party. So they don't philosophically disagree. But there is a kind of, for lack of a better word, a kind of a pissing contest happening between the two branches of government because they're using it for political optics. And again, in that debate, in that contest, fundamentally, there's a lot of misinformation. And the public is kind of like confused and doesn't know what the heck's going on. And again, I think this goes back to the fact that there really hasn't been a lot of transparency since July.
I think the deliberative process is necessary, even if there's not a signature line for the county council, and we can, be led to assume that the county council's approval, whatever, isn't necessary. I think taking the issue, taking something that's so controversial, and it shouldn't be controversial. I don't think the WSO model, the 287G thing, should be controversial, but it has blown up because, like I said, the groups, ACLU, all these different organizations that have been, branding it as this terrible boogeyman organization, an entity, this initiative. So I think it's good to have deliberation. You say that there hasn't been transparency since July. I think that last week we saw a step in the right direction in regards to being transparent. I think that's an important thing. I don't think we should be criticizing. Well, criticism is good in all cases. I think all types of criticism is important and all types of disagreement is important. But we have a different way of seeing things in regards to the county executive. I think that it's simply been like I said, a work in process, and I think work in progress. Gosh, my verbal skills are not really holding out today. But I think that it's important to do that, and I think that it has been handled as best as they've been able to handle. With
3 minutes. And can you guys be about 20% louder? Can you do it?
I think I can. I think I can hack it.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
So yeah, you're absolutely right. It's great that after 4 months there's some transparency, but this is part of the problem. We had July, we had August, we had September, and now we have most of October, where we got literally from the same person 4 or 5 different proposals depending on who the news anchor was and what day of the week it was. And so you're right. It's a good step in the direction, but the question becomes, why didn't the community get involvement from day one? Why doesn't the executive go to the community and say, hey, here's what I'm thinking. I'm supposedly representing you in the community. Here's what I want to do with ICE, right? These are the options we've got. Let's do it. Why not go to a church with Haitian community members to explain what it is and what it's not? We didn't get that. What do we get? We got interviews with the Baltimore Sun. We got interviews with certain, groups online, that are friendly to this particular politician. And we didn't get public discussion about what the issues were. And again, I want to say this. I actually personally don't care where any individual stands on the issue, but I want you to be informed about it before you make a decision. right? It's much like in a classroom. I'm not here to teach you what to think. I'm here to teach you how to think. You make the decision based on the documents, based on the evidence. This county executive failed us. She failed the people. She failed her own Republicans. She failed Democrats. She failed independents. Because in the end, in my opinion, humbly, it's about re-election. It's not about interaction.
I wouldn't say the county executive has failed us. I think that she's delivering on what the people want in Wycomico County. You saw 150 or so Haitian immigrants come out and say that they hate 287G. You saw a lot of people in the community who don't like it. But what you don't see, what you haven't heard, is that there are a lot of people who are strongly in support of this program and implementing it and getting it passed as soon as possible and having that cooperation between Immigration Customs Enforcement and the Wycomico County. I think that, well, actually, it's something that a lot of people in the community want. So if the job of an elected official is to deliver on what the constituents want, what I'll argue is that the county executive has done a relatively good job. Could more public forums be a good thing? Could we have some more public discussion and forums like this?
30 seconds.
Talking, yeah, sure thing. But at the end of the day, fundamentally, I think that she's delivered for the constituents of Wycomico County and what they actually want.
Sure. And again, let's be real. You kind of have to say that because you're working with her politically.
Well, not necessarily.
Oh,
I
okay.
have independence. I'm
no,
so like Maryland,
wait, can I-
for instance. Yeah, sure.
I'm sorry. Actually, we got 6 seconds, so let's wait till we.
Sure.
We're good.
Okay.
We're both young men, right?
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. You know what? A year ago, I'd agree with you. Nowadays, not so much. Okay. I understand. I understand. It might
Am I
seem-
getting that old? No. Don't answer that
You
question.
saw from my ID photo, I wasn't looking great. Back
We'll have closing statements as well, so if there's anything else that is not within the subtopics that you want to address as well, you'll be able to do so.
Sure.
So, okay, so the third out of 4 subtopics that will be debated is the question, and we're going to broaden it out a little bit. We're not going to focus necessarily as much on 287G, although you can if you would like to. It is the question, is mass deportation or deportation generally moral or immoral?
So now we're getting into the philosophy.
Yes.
Beautiful. Do you want to
Yes.
start? Or should...
I'll start. Sure.
Okay.
So I think it's moral because it's.
Oh, sorry. Just a suggestion because we got 10 minutes.
Yes?
What if we try to do like 2 minutes each? So we
Sure
do
thing. Yeah. You
Okay.
could. Yeah. You
Just
could.
a thought.
And
Okay.
if I run out, if I don't finish, I'll just yield my time to
Sure.
Thanks.
Dr. Venosa. Joe.
There you go. Now I feel young.
Joey.
Joey.
Joey Venosa.
When you start talking, I'll begin the timer.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, I think deportation is moral. I mean, it's about what's right and wrong. I mean, that's what we're talking about. If someone breaks the law, should we enact punishment? Should we enact a boundary? Should we say, like, if someone violates a rule that we've stated, should we just give them a pass, or should we actually implement the law, enforce it? And I am someone, and I talked about this in my opening statement, I think the law should be enforced. Because in a state of nature, where there are no laws, where there are no rules, where people are just able to be human beings, it's not a good situation. I mean, you can look at any society that doesn't have laws, that doesn't have structure, that doesn't have organized, government. It's anarchy. I mean, people are killing each other. They're looting, they're robbing. Human nature is not good. That's my understanding of human nature. It is not a great thing. People are inherently greedy. They are inherently interested in self-promotion and self-interest. We can see this in our political world today. I mean, people are just bloodthirsty, and they channel it into different forms, like politics, like business, corporations, things like that. But at the essence, people can be really bad, and so we need law and order in the country. And so if people, if I wanted to go into Joe's house, for instance, I might be really cold out because it's winter, or I might be living in a mud shack or something like that. I went in West Virginia, something like that. It's made out of tobacco spit, and it's not a great place. And I come into your house, I don't ask for permission. I just walk into your house without permission, without being invited in. you have the right to throw me out of your house. I think you should have, because even if I like wash the dishes and cook and stuff like that and contribute to your house economy, it doesn't mean that I'm invited and that I'm not welcome. So.
I'd at least make you take off your shoes.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
That's what I learned after 18 years of marriage. Take off your shoes. Is mass deportation moral? Is the question.
Yes.
Okay. And it's a great question. It's a great philosophical question.
Or deportation.
Or deportation. It's a really important philosophical question. It's a really important historical question. Now, you said you're an Orthodox Christian, right?
I am, yes.
Very good. I had about 2 years in the Greek Orthodox tradition. So,
Really?
yeah. So, I'm going to tie that in. So you watch how I work my
I
magic.
will.
Okay.
I'll watch.
All right. Deportation or mass deportation is moral and immoral depending on who you are and whether you get to make the decision. Read the Bible, Torah, read the Quran, read the Bhagavad Gita. You will find all examples of mass deportation. The Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Aksumite Empire, the Ptolemaic Egyptian rulers. You will find different examples of that. The question becomes, right, does a society have a kind of moral code to justify it? In 1923, Greece and Turkey, two newly independent countries, well, Turkey was very newly independent. Greece had been around about a century. They agreed to a mutual population exchange. What that meant was 2 million people were kicked out on both sides. Basically, 1.6 million Greeks were kicked out of Turkey, said, even though you were born here, even though you've grown up, this is all you've ever known, you're a Greek citizen now, you're not Turkish, get out. And about 350,000 Turks from Greek areas were given the same treatment. It was a mass population deportation on both sides. They both justified it morally, and they both justified it politically. But here's the thing. In the end, your view of the morality is all based on whether you think it's a good or bad thing in your experience. You're of Irish descent, right?
Yes.
When the British decided in the potato famine to mass deport the Irish because they were, in their view, a starving subrace of people, they viewed it in moral terms.
And Joe, that was 2 minutes if you want to go back and forth.
Sure, I'll stop. So, can I just say one quick thing, and then I'll yield?
Yeah.
So the point is, the morality issue is all in the eye of the, decider versus the person being decided upon. And so I think that's the context of the nature of the debate. That's different from immigration law when we're looking at it historically.
I don't think it necessarily depends upon which group is doing it or in which historical context. I think that it depends upon why it's happening. If, for instance, like you mentioned, the potato famine, Irish were not looked kindly upon. They were despised, hated. They were, considered like mules and stuff like that, whatever. And, so there was a great, deal of hatred for them just because of that reason. And so, for instance, with the British, kicking them out, I think that is immoral. If you kick out people just because they are of a particular race or a particular ethnicity, then yes, it is immoral. If that is the reason you are getting rid of people just because of their race, like I said, that's immoral. But if you were deporting people because you were trying to organize and manage and run a country, and you're trying to implement laws, and you're trying to have borders, which is essential for any kind of nation, that's I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that is a totally moral thing. And especially when you look at the legal immigrants who are coming to this country who have to wait years and years in order to get into. Like the Haitian immigrants, a lot of them were really, really great people who came up, they're business owners. They came here legally. They came through the right, they came through the door in the right way. And just think about the disservice that we're doing to them by turning a blind eye to people who are coming into the country illegally. That happened during the Biden administration. 2021 to 2024, millions of people came into the country undocumented. And so, that's doing, in my opinion, doing a disservice to the legal immigrants, to American citizens who are natural born, because again, it is using up resources that we do not have. There are a bunch of people in our country who are impoverished, who are in dire poverty, who need government resources. My father and my mother are both on Social Security disability income. They've never been employed in my entire life. So, I grew up with WIC, food stamps, things like that. American citizens need those programs. American citizens need those services. Legal immigrants need those services. We cannot give it away. We cannot pass it all out and say, oh, anyone who wants to come, we want to be compassionate. If you're from a war-torn place, if you're wanting to get to America, here you go. Here are the resources. We can't do that as a country. That's my opinion. I think it's immoral to do that.
And that would be your 2 minutes?
Yes.
And you'll be able to have an extra minute or so as well.
Oh, cool.
So it'll be
All
two
right.
2-minute sections apiece.
Okay.
And it'll be about 10 minutes.
I was never good at math. I'll take your word for it.
Okay. I'm a math major, so.
Now I'm really scared. Okay. So you bring up some really important points about the context. You said that it's not immoral when governments or states are engaging in deportation for like issues of maintaining order,
Yes.
of social cohesion,
Yes.
right? Right.
Yes.
So when Germany tried to mass deport Jews in the 30s, right, that was the argument. Or when the Turks kicked out all those Orthodox Greeks in the 1920s, the same argument. They said, we have to maintain a lawful society of proud Muslim Turks. We can't have these outsiders who are of an alien religion, even if they're from the area. We're a new nation now. We have to make our nation stronger and Turkish, so we'll kick out the Greeks. So the point is, the morality that you and I are talking about, or the immorality and the idea of law and cohesion, is often mixed up. And again, it's highly subjective. But one of the things that's interesting about the United States history is that we've had these back and forths. The United States, as I said, was never founded on specific immigration policy. If you read the Constitution, there's very little in there. It wasn't until 1790 that the very first law on immigration was passed. It's called the 1790 Naturalization Act. You should look it up. It's really interesting because it says citizenship is reserved for free white men of good character who have been residing for at least 2 years. Then you get years later with the Dred Scott decision where the Supreme Court actually says in their argument that people of African descent, black people, were never meant to have citizenship. So nations all the time change their definition of who is a citizen and who belongs. And one of the great things about the United States is the fact that rights and freedoms, can be expanded upon and fought for. But of course, the other side of it is that those rights can be taken away. And so I think when we talk about morality, we always have to remember that everybody's always going to make a moral argument to do something, and everybody's always going to make a moral argument to resist it. But the question of, does a nation have a right to secure its borders? Absolutely. And we should remember that mass immigration, undocumented immigration, illegal immigration was happening long before the Biden administration. Many Republican and Democratic presidents have welcomed in undocumented immigrants at various points. And it is a very long-standing, complicated issue that I don't think mass deportation is just going to solve overnight.
10 seconds.
Well, I agree on that point. There have been former administrations who have welcomed, like, for instance, 1986 amnesty with Reagan. He was a free market Republican who believed that we just open our borders, allow people to come in, and the corporations benefit because you get to pay them less than American citizens. That's well.
Give it to him. Come on, give it to him.
I'm going to go on a little bit, okay?
Go ahead.
And, Clinton proposed the Immigration Policy Act back at, Immigration Policy, 1996, the Act, whatever, and, that kind of put more restrictions on illegal immigration. Sure. We currently see it created the 287G program. So the 287G program created by a Democrat,
right.
Moderate Democrat. Yeah. So you again talked about, historical instances that are dependent upon race and ethnicity. Yeah. And, so where in current immigration law, where in ICE policy currently does it state that because someone is Hispanic or because someone is Haitian or because someone is a minority, they need to be deported? Where does it state that?
Okay.
Do you want to save that for the closing statements?
No, that's the question.
Well, why don't we put it into the next section because
Sure.
I can directly answer it then.
Okay.
Sure. Okay. So that was our third subtopic. We're now going to get into our fourth topic, and this will be the final 10-minute segment of tonight's debate between Colin and Joe. So the fourth topic, we are going to approach the question, does the American legal immigration system, legal, not illegal, but legal immigration system need to be reformed?
Does the American legal immigration system need to be reformed? 1,000% it does. And I don't think anybody on the right or left would actually argue with that. The question is, what does it look like? You're absolutely right that it's very difficult to legally come here. My wife was a political asylee who came here as a student and then worked to get her citizenship. So it is a very long, laborious process. And I don't want to offend any native-born Americans here, but I'm going to make the argument that any person who has legally immigrated here and become a citizen knows far more about civics and citizenship and civic duty than most native-born people. I think we tend to, again, not everybody, but we tend to be a bit lazy on it because it's a privilege. You don't think about it, right? Like you and I, just by virtue of where our mothers decided to give birth to us, became American, right? It's not a skill, it's an accident of birth. So we have to keep that in mind. We definitely need immigration reform, but here's the sad reality. It's in the interest of the current political system to not do that. Case in point, about 12 years ago, 13 years ago, under Barack Obama, the Democrats had a supermajority in Congress to pass immigration reform and never did it. Then the Trump administration, in the first 2 years in its first term, in 2017, 2018, had the same opportunity. They didn't do it. They currently control the House and Senate and the presidency. You think they're going to do it? No, they're not going to do it. And the reason is very simple. They get their engagement, they get their base supported by not solving the problem. It's not in the interest of most Democrats and Republicans to actually solve the problem. It's in the interest to get people fighting about it and then to get us to turn against each other. I got a lot of friends on different sides of the aisle. And believe me, when we talk about what we're hearing in our media echo chamber, it's not good for society because we're not looking at actual solutions to specific problems. We're looking at, you're a crazy right-winger, I'm a crazy left-winger, whatever, and we're not solving the problem. So do we need to fix it? Absolutely. But am I going to bet that the current political situation is going to do it? No.
Personally, I'll agree with your point that American citizens take our rights and our privileges and what we have for granted. That's totally the case. People tend to, barely anyone votes. I mean, there are a bunch of young people that, could be voting in these elections, local elections, national elections. They just don't. A lot of legal immigrants actually do vote. They care about their rights. They're, as American citizens, all that.
Yep.
I was actually looking at a study that said that 94% of illegal immigrant households have at least one worker in the household, as opposed to 75% with natural-born citizens. So there definitely is a laziness problem with the United States, with our citizenry. I agree with that. There is a lot of laziness. And
Can you say that again? I'm sorry.
there's a big laziness problem with
the
American citizens.
94%,
and this will
sorry.
this be added as taken away from the time?
Yeah,
Sure.
So 94% of illegal immigrant households have at least one worker in the household, as opposed to only 75% of American citizens, natural. So I respect that. I respect how hard illegal immigrants work, immigrants in general.
Mm-hmm.
I respect that. But, at the end of the day, I mean, we need law and order, as I've said again, and I want to talk about should we have immigration reform? To an extent, maybe we should. It depends upon what kind of reforms we're doing. But fundamentally, I don't think that we should make it a very, very easy process to come into the country and become a legal citizen, because we have limited resources as it is already. Back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, turn of the century, we had a lot more land to be developed. We had barely any social security net, any security. We didn't have FDR, we didn't have the New Deal, so people would just come over, work, build a house, whatever. They didn't have to. They were not compensated by government services, which currently happens. So I don't think it should be extensively reformed to an extent where it's very easy to become a legal immigrant. I think that should be a long, arduous process, like it currently is. Maybe it shouldn't be as long and arduous, but I think it should be a long process because it is a privilege to be an American citizen. And again, we have limited resources. We can barely, and I've said this again, I'll repeat it, we can barely take care of our own American citizens, legal and natural born. So, I mean, it should be a difficult process at the end of the day. It should be. It should be long, and there should be a lot of qualifications and tests and all these things done.
Yeah. Well, again, I mean, the point with that is, and I think anybody, and I don't know if anybody here has actually worked towards citizenship, but if you have, you know that it already is quite extensive. It is very expensive. It is very extensive. It is not an easy thing. And one of the problems is that you've got people who are now caught in a system where they did sort of do the thing that they were expecting, right? Like, for example, there were about 400,000 Haitians who were brought here as guest workers for the agricultural industry. And that protected status was then taken away by the federal government. So you brought people over who were given legal work authorization because the agricultural firms needed them, all the chicken farms around here needed them, right? They wanted cheap immigrant labor, so they got the work authorization, and then the government, under a new administration, took it away. So now you got people who came here the right way, were brought over for workers, then that status has been revoked, and now they're in limbo, and now they're going to be sent back, theoretically, even though that's going to cost a lot more money to actually do it in these sort of various ways. And so what you got here is what I said earlier. You got a system that basically ping-pongs and doesn't solve anything. And so if you're looking at it in terms of resources and fairness, you know, you can look at that in the other way too. Every undocumented immigrant also pays taxes, right? When they go to the store and they pay a sales tax. They also, even if they are non-citizens and are legal workers, they often can't qualify for Social Security or Medicare or Medicaid. So they're actually putting into the system and they don't get anything out of it. So if you're talking about fairness, you could look at it from that perspective. In regards to, you know, whether or not the country in the past was more justified in letting people in, that's a great historical debate. That's why you should take a history class, God forbid, with somebody else other than me. But ultimately, the policies change. From 1790 until 1924, the United States basically had an open border, at least for Europeans. If you're coming over from Europe, you literally got off a boat, as the saying went, and you were there. There was no background check. There was very little health check until Ellis Island was created in the 1890s, and even then it was very minimal. There was a certain point where in Boston, 10,000 undocumented Irish immigrants were coming per week. So we've had it before, and we have absorbed it in different ways. We could get into a longer debate about the demographic trends and the fact that we actually are losing population, but that's, I think, a debate for another time. But I think the point here is that it is a really complicated issue. You got to look at the history, and you got to look ultimately at, are we trying to solve the problem, or are we just trying to play games with it?
It is a complicated issue, and your example of in the turn of the century where all these European immigrants were coming over, that's also very complicated. We can't compare it to modern day because around this time, I mean, people just got off the boat. Yes, they, you know, became citizens almost immediately. The American population was so much smaller at that time than it currently is. We do not have a social security. We did not have the New Deal. We did not have, these requirements of the government to assist people who are impoverished. And additionally, what I'll say is that most of these European immigrants, because it was such a small number coming over in comparison to the population, particularly in comparison to the millions that we saw during 2021 to 2024, they assimilated into the culture. They've learned the language like almost like within months or within a year, they would learn English. And, you know, that's a problem. I mean, like if we think about like burdens for Social Security, for like government services and such, I mean, I mentioned this, translators are needed because a large number, and I think this can be solved in many ways, a large number of legal immigrants currently in the United States, 46% are non-English speakers. How do we solve that problem? We need to think about how do we solve that, because, you know, that creates just that fact alone, not only the fact that Maryland is a sanctuary state and actually illegal immigrants can't qualify for Medicaid and Medicaid services, emergency services. If they go to the hospital, they need to be covered. They need to be assisted. So we can't we can't ignore the fact that there is a large burden that, you know, a large number of illegal immigrants being in our community creates for these local governments and for the state government.
30 seconds.
Do you mind if I?
Yeah, sure thing.
You said assimilation was something that
I think it's an important
Okay,
thing.
so when my great-great-great-grandfather, Arturo Venosa, terrible name, when he came here in the 1880s, didn't speak a word of English his entire life. There's a reason why Little Italies, Chinatowns, Greek towns, and other communities existed, because initially immigrant communities do cluster. Then they assimilate over time, and that's what you're beginning to see in this country, as has always been the case. So I think time takes some of the issues away. Most immigrant kids are going to learn 3 or 4 languages anyway. Anybody here who's from an immigrant home knows that already. So I think when you're talking about the resource issue, I think it's not as monolithic as you might paint it to be. In regards to medical services, everybody, according to a 1986 law passed by Ronald Reagan, ironically, everybody who goes to the ER has to be cared for. That doesn't mean they're not on the hook for the bill, though. So when we're talking about uncompensated care with undocumented people, again, it is a little bit more complicated. But.
And that's time. So that was our final section of the debate in terms of the 4 subsections that we had to debate. However, we are going to have closing statements. Is 5 minutes okay?
Yeah, sure thing, sure thing.
Okay.
Joe, you can start.
Phenomenal.
Cool. All right, I'm going to stand again on this one.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
I got it. All right,
Please,
so
please.
first of all, I'm blown away that everybody's still here. I don't know whether this means we're cool or you're losers or both, but I appreciate it. I've said this to you many times privately, and I've said it to many of you that have taken me. I'm very grateful as a person that I can do this for a living. And I was the first person in my family to go to college. My dad, he worked his ass off in construction his whole life. Never graduated high school. I come from a very blue-collar family from New York, so I talk like this. And one of the things that I've always appreciated is I get to go up every day. I go to class or I talk and do things like this. And we get to talk about ideas. We get to talk about ideas that I think are important and that they matter. And we get to do it in a way where we get to exercise those freedoms that make the United States such a great country. You're right. That's why people come here. There's a tremendous uniqueness to the country. Doesn't mean the United States is more unique than other countries, but there is a specialness to this place because it's founded on certain ideas. And I think immigrants actually tend to appreciate that more, regardless of the status. I want to say that if you're in the crowd and you disagree with anything I have said or anything Colin has said, that's good. You should. I think one of the things that's interesting about this event was I was actually approached by a few people who told me, don't do it. They're like, don't do it. I was like, why? Because they're going to trap you. I was like, what do you mean? They're going to set you up for a debate. I was like, well, we're going to talk about issues, right? I was like, all right, good. And I said, look, I'm not scared. I'm married. and I've known Colin a long time. I knew him when he was little. I knew him when he was 6'8". Not 6'10".
It's a while ago.
It's a while ago. So even though I really disagree with a lot of the things he believes, and I'm sure vice versa, and there's complicated reasons why we all get to where we think about, I'm really grateful that we can sit and debate and talk about issues that matter. I mean, we're technically in an unauthorized meeting right now, so I don't know if your club's going to have to deal with that. I'm just a guest. But you all came to talk about an issue that you felt mattered. Didn't matter if you were Republican, Democrat, left-wing, right-wing. Doesn't matter. Again, I'm politically an independent who tends to lean left on national stuff and thinks local politics shouldn't be partisan. That's a really important thing. It's a really, really important thing that you care enough to do that. Because you're here getting to do something that people all over the world don't get. You're getting the chance to learn. You get to go every day and talk about ideas in class. You get to learn how to be a better nurse, right? Or be, God forbid, a better finance major or social worker or history major. That's a beautiful thing. It's a really beautiful thing to have, and you should always remember that. I love the fact that I come from a working class family because I take a lot of that into the classroom. I don't forget the fact of what my parents did to get me here, and neither should you. So when anybody ever says they want to debate or talk and you say, I'm cutting them off because they're a conservative or they're a liberal because I disagree, you're doing a disservice to why learning occurs. This institution, not just Salisbury, but the university, was created thousands of years ago on the idea that a place where people come together and share and compete and talk about things matters. We can't lose sight of that. I don't care who's president. I don't care the nature of the economy. I don't care what party you are. I don't care whether you support the executive or not. I don't. But the point is, this place and this ideal matters. And the idea of free speech is not just something that the right or the left should own. Everybody owns it. So you should engage people you disagree with. You should engage people that you fundamentally disagree with. And you should work at trying to get to an understanding on certain things. Because realistically, I think most of us actually have a common ground on many things. Again, Colin and I might disagree on a lot, but I've seen him. I've seen him how he interacts with my beautiful son. I've seen him how he talks to different people. I know that some of the political rhetoric that we use, is tied into things beyond our control. But realistically, we all got to live in this community or in this world. And we all got to we all got to make sense of it. So whether you identify in one way or the other, to me, is very irrelevant. Focus on the content of the idea and the argument and be willing to engage it, embrace it, even if you don't like it. The hardest thing in the world you'll ever do is to really try to listen to something that you don't agree with. There's an old expression, God gives us 2 ears and 1 mouth because it's twice as hard to listen than it is to speak.
10 seconds.
Make use of that concept. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Venosa, for that wonderful closing statement. I'll try to make this brief because we've been here for the past hour. We're not even supposed to be here. I'm probably going to get in serious trouble, actually, because we have dozens of people, and I don't even think we had a room registered in the first place. So, better to ask for forgiveness than permission, I suppose. But it is really wonderful to see everyone come out. I'm glad we were able to do this. For the past couple months, I've really wanted to organize something where we sat down, 2 people from different ends of the spectrum, sit down, discuss an issue, discuss a heated topic, something like illegal immigration, why not? So when I texted Dr. Venosa last night, I said, are you still able to come to the CR meeting and do a little mock debate? And he was willing to do so. We had discussed possibly doing something like this, engaging people, doing political discourse, all that, and I think it's a really wonderful thing. So we disagree on the issue in many ways. There are some things we agree on. There are some things we agree on and that we have common ground with, but there are some major things. And I think it really boils down to the kind of left-right dichotomy, the difference. Is that leftists, and I'm not going to call you, that's not an insult, by the way. Like I said, leftist professor versus right-wing student or whatever, Actually, I use myself in the college Republican thing because I know that a lot of people feel very strongly about me. Okay, some people do. So I was like, how do you get people engaged? And you have a lot of students. You have a lot of people in your classes. I've never had the privilege of taking a class with Dr. Venosa, unfortunately. I'd like to, but maybe sometime before I graduate next semester. But leftists and people on the left tend to be more compassionate. They tend to see human nature as they view it as being more good. That corporations, corporate greed, that our societies, that our institutions are the things that make us bad, that make people bad. Whereas Republicans and people on the right, a lot of times we tend to believe that it's not these corporations and these institutions and these things that make us bad, but it's our own human nature. And that's why we need to, go to church, why we need to pray, why we need to, rein ourselves in and, direct our energies towards a positive direction. And when it comes to the topic of borders and immigration and things like that, I think law and order is extremely important, and that even if it is, and I'm just going to say it, okay? A lot of people that are illegal immigrants are great people. They do a lot of work. They contribute to society in many ways. But if we allow one person to stay, if we, if we're compassionate in that way, then what we have is, like, why is it that some people are able to get like a free pass, a free amnesty, whatever it might be? Why am I waiting years to get legal immigration status? Why am I waiting years to become a U.S. citizen? So if we forget and abandon our laws, if we abandon our rules, then we'll have a society that is dysfunctional, it's disordered. A lot of people, both immigrants, natural-born citizens, and illegal immigrants, will not be in a good position. We will be harmed, and I don't think it's a good thing. I think it's important that we have that kind of harsh way of thinking. So we have this, this way of thinking, the right way of thinking, not like right-leaning way of thinking, and then we have the left. And I think it's important for our society that we have both and that we have that clash and we have these discussions. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. Thank you for coming. And I'm going to hand it over to Pax now.
Okay. Thank you so much, Colin and Joe. That was our entire debate, and those were our closing statements. I thought it was an excellent debate. I hope everyone here thought it was phenomenal. Now, I know everyone is excited to leave, maybe. Maybe you'd like to ask some questions instead. So, Joe and Colin have said that they would be willing to answer some questions. If anyone in here would like to ask away, we'll call on you. You can raise your hand. Also, if you'd like to give a recommendation for topics in the future that we can do debates with. All right. Any questions? Yes?
Awesome. I think it was the third question that was asked towards the end of it. You asked about any specific legislation that was contributing to ICE and, I guess, just honing in on a certain demographic. What would your commentary be on the Supreme Court ruling? I think it was Venosa.
I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with that. What's the general synopsis of that one?
So basically, it was just a Supreme Court ruling that allowed, I guess the Supreme Court said that they overruled lower courts saying that it was okay for enforcement officers to look at people's, actually visually, seek them out, the color of their skin, the language that they're speaking, and things like that in order to, what's the word? Keep them there and question and detain them.
Basically, it allows for racial profiling as a use in immigration enforcement. That's.
It explicitly stated that?
I don't know. Yeah, yeah, but that's the essence of it.
It says, the ruling has allowed federal immigration agents to stop and question individuals based on factors including race, ethnicity, language, and employment, overturning a lower court order that had prohibited these tactics.
I think racial profiling is a bad thing. I think we can all agree on that. So, that's my position. I mean, this particular case, I wouldn't say I agree with it based upon the, synopsis that you've given. I'll have to do some more research. However, I don't think that when it comes to, trials and courts, things like that, when it comes to the actual proceedings that, or explicitly stated in the policy, that is a, race or ethnicity is a determining factor in whether or not someone's going to be deported. But I'll look into that. I don't agree with racial profiling. I think that's a bad thing.
And what was the name of that again?
It was the Supreme Court ruling Noam versus Perdomo.
Okay.
It's very recent.
Thank you for that question.
Thank you.
I think there was a hand up there.
Sure.
So everywhere on the news, and I think have a little bit of aggressive towards not just immigrants, but the immigrants. Do you think that and how we think immigrants? Because once again, it is just based on what I'm seeing. I know that it's not happening everywhere, but should there be more rules in how we're running and the fact that there are citizens who retain just very, maybe not by race, but a lot of cases have had
I think there should be some pretty extensive training when it comes to preparing people to step into these ICE roles. I don't, I'm not familiar with the actual protocols for how the training happens. But if it's a situation where, certain bad apples are, being overly aggressive and harming people, particularly when it comes to women and children, that's definitely something that I would, have a problem with. And I think those individual people, if they are found, being very aggressive with people and not, following the protocol, which, they follow, like, being moral and ethical, then I think that they should be punished or, lose their role or status as an ICE agent. So, yeah, I mean, when it comes to people that they're detaining who are, acting violently and who are being aggressive, then I think, responding with force is a necessary thing. But when it comes to people who are harmless, say like elderly or women and children or things like that, then yeah, I think if there are cases where that's happening, that should be addressed and those people should be, punished and there should be consequences for that.
But there were rumors of ICE on campus, and although that's not a lot of situations, that was, I think that's what Mr. Watson said, when they shoot ICE, they take young white males or white males in general, and they, immigrants to the ground. So I think what you're saying, that there needs to be change, that's not what
Yeah, I understand. I heard about that rumor. I don't know how, like, what, were there any ICE agents on, like, I don't, like, who? Oh, I see. Okay.
Thank you for that
Yeah,
question.
thank you.
I saw you with your hand up.
This question for Colin. Dr. Venosa asked, or he brought up the topic of Haitians coming over with work visas, and there was, what he said, 40,000 or some big amount of them, and then that was taken away by a different administration. So what would be your opinion on what happens to those Haitians who came over illegally, and then suddenly it seemed that Venosa had mentioned it's taken away? And I'm sure there's other circumstances where that's happening. What would your response be?
If we analyze the law and we find, say, like, that these work visas were given out freely, like they were handed out like candy or something like that, and now the new administration is taking it back, I can understand that. However, I don't think these, like, they shouldn't be, like, there shouldn't be an extreme, like, there shouldn't be punishment for that, because they came over under, like, say, like, we assume that the Biden administration, for instance, let's say it's a little bit more loose and you can get, work visas very easily, and then the Trump administration comes and take those away. I don't think that they should be, like, thrown in jail or anything like that. Do I think that they should be, sent back to their countries of origin if it's determined that they have not gone through as extensive a process as the new administration deems to be necessary or correct? Then yes. I don't think that they should be punished necessarily, but if it's been determined that these work visas are, were, like, handed out very easily without proper and extensive, protocol done, yeah. But again, I don't think they should be, like, punished or demonized for that. Yes?
I have a question for you, Joe.
Yeah.
So kind of 2 points on the third topic covering the morality of deportation. You said that you believe that the morality on the situation kind of depends on the person. If morality depends on the person, how can it be a thing? How can, because morality is more of a societal agreement on right and wrong. And then secondly, to further that point, you said that other countries in the past, like Turkey and Greece, they deported people they felt that didn't belong, and same with Nazi Germany. I feel like that's not really a valid assessment for the situation, because here in the U.S. we do deport people, but we also allow people to come in legally, and that if we have no laws and no container on what people can and cannot do, then, like Colin said, there will be anarchy, and that's even stated in the Bible in Genesis 2, when God gives Adam and Eve the commandment that they can't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and when they disobey that, they still have to face the consequences to their actions. So, curious on.
Good. Yeah, a lot to unpack there. And I'm sorry, man. It's been a long week. What's your name?
I'm Lucas.
Lucas. Gotcha. Can anybody hear me? All right. Could everybody hear Lucas's question? You want me to repeat it? Yes? No? That's a yes. That's good enough for me.
So his question was about the nature of the morality, right? It was about specifically, individuals can feel one way or another, but there are kind of societal values, right? That's the first one. And the second one was about, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you were kind of phrasing it in terms of what the Bible says, right?
Yes.
Okay. So let's start with the first thing. Morality is both an individual and a socially collective thing. And it is subject to change. And what I did say, actually, for clarification, the point that I thought I was trying to make, is that morality is often very subjective, not necessarily from the individual, but also if you're part of those that are doing the deporting versus being deported, right? For example, you were born in this country, right?
Correct.
Okay. So what if an authority came in and said, well, it doesn't matter that you were born here, but because your great-grandfather was from Scotland, we now retroactively revoke citizenship and you're going back home. That happens. That's happened in countries like Nepal and Bhutan. When I was a much younger man with better hair and a better face, I worked in refugee resettlement. And I would work with people from different countries who were literally in countries for generations. And the countries then had regimes that snatched away the concept of citizenship and deported. And it's often framed in morality, right? It's saying they're not really Nepalese, or they're not really Ethiopian, or they're not really Ghanaian or Greek or whatever. So that morality is always very elastic because anybody can use it. In regards to the concept about the Bible, we can find different things of that. You read, it's all interesting stuff, but you can read Deuteronomy, right? There are specific guidelines about what kind of genocide you can engage in. You can kill the Akkadians, you can kill the Philistines, you can enslave these people. There's literally guidelines. On the other hand, other parts of the Bible, like the Newer Testament, which I guess from a Christian perspective you could argue supersedes the Old, says things like, treat the stranger with full kindness and full welcoming, for you two were strangers in the land of Egypt. You can find passages that talk about literally, to Colin's point, you have to open the home to a stranger. And yes, let them in. Now again, we can debate the practicality of that, but if you're looking at the morality, I can find you a religious argument to make that. Now I'm not a Christian, but I have some theological background, and I study it and I teach the history of it every now and then. And I think like all religion, there's incredibly beautiful moral teachings in that faith and other ones. And I think part of the challenge with religion and faith is that we can sometimes use it for our own political expediency, right? We can say, well, the Bible says I can deport. Here's where it is. And then you can find somebody else who has a different agenda and say, well, here's what the Bible says here. So I don't know if using the Bible, especially in a society that, yes, we are founded to some extent on Judeo-Christian influence, but we're also founded on the influence of a whole lot of other faiths and ideas and Enlightenment and, deism and separation. So I don't know politically and practically if I'm going to fall back on the religious rationale, but I will say that in terms of morality, it's often very subjective, and that can be dangerous depending on the situation. I don't know if I answered it. I'm sorry.
Would you like to take a stab at that question, Colin?
Well, time limits, time constraints. Are there any more questions?
Do one more question, maybe?
Sure.
Oh, we got two.
You got two? Let's do popcorn.
No. Just ask, guys, just ask. We'll make it work.
I was just going to ask for your thoughts on the case of Margaret Garcia, the fact that he was deported to a country that he had legal protections from, the fact that he was not charged until after he was returned back to Maryland, the fact that the Supreme Court ordered that the current administration needed to cooperate, and they did not for the first several weeks. So I was just wondering if something similar were to happen in Comico County, especially considering that we're also in Maryland, would you think that that is in line with the type of mass deportation that you see?
Whoops. I think that's it. What was that?
My pen, take good care of it.
Oh, yeah.
Not anymore, brother.
Yeah, I've been biting on it. Okay, might be. Okay, so yeah, with that particular case, although I think it could have been handled better, however, I have looked into the history and we have heard, I mean, like, you know, there are verified reports of this individual, or last name Kilmar Garcia, right? Garcia. That he was involved in the MS-13 gang, that he had an extensive record of like, you know, beating and abusing his wife, and then the Democrats and people in power, you know, like our own Senator Chris Van Hollen, I believe, made this person out to be like some sort of, you know, martyr or hero or something like that, which I totally disagree with. I don't think that we should be like, you know, investing so much. I understand, like, you know, due process and giving this person a trial and things like that. I think that could have been handled better. Yes, but at the end of the day, I mean, this individual, you know, was here illegally, from what I understand. I mean, yes, he had a protective order from El Salvador because he was being persecuted, I believe, by a rival gang, and so. You know, and this was at a time, I believe, when El Salvador was still, like, basically run by gangs. This was before Nayib Bukele. And actually, I want to touch on that a little bit. A lot of people say, like, we make the argument sometimes, instead of, like, taking in millions of immigrants to the country who were fleeing, maybe that, you know, these like, foreign countries can be fixed. And some people say, well, that's impossible, that's not going to happen. I think what we see in El Salvador, yes, it is very authoritarian. It is it is a dictatorship in a large way. The Constitution has been, you know, kind of like tossed out the window. But at the end of the day, I mean, there's like no more gang violence in El Salvador. There are these mega prisons that are enforcing law and order. I think it's a much better, it's a much better country than what it was in the past.
Ask for forgiveness and not for
Well,
Yeah, she kind of like touched on a little bit of my point that I was gonna make. I think I was more just gonna ask about the case by case basis kind of issue, which, I mean, to my understanding, your point is that it doesn't matter the case by case basis. If you're an illegal immigrant, we have the right to deport you, which I guess I understand. And Dr. Venosa, you can also at the time answer.
You can go with Joe. Don't be scared.
But I was just more like trying to figure out and gauge. I mean, yeah, we have the right to deport these people, but is your belief that we should deport people no matter the case basis? Because I mean, there is like a certain irony in like, yeah, and like, you know, like just having
like,
this,
for instance,
having
reporting
this
on
stuff.
it,
Yeah.
like, should that have been evaluated on a case-by-case basis?
like I said, I think it may have been handled better, but at the end of the day, I think it was justified to deport Kelmar. I don't think I think he, you know, he committed a lot of crimes. He was not, he was not he did not have a green card, from what I understand. He had some protective status, but I mean, he wasn't. I think he was also charged with human trafficking as well. Human trafficking. After, of course, yeah, exactly. This, like, the process could have been better, but at the end of the day, I mean, he was charged with, human trafficking. You know, I mean, like I said, he assaulted his wife, all these different things. I mean, not a good guy. Yes, I think that, like I said, it could have been handled better. In regards to case-by-case basis, should people be deported in all cases? I mean, you know, that's a question of should. It's, you know, it's in our law. I think we need to abide by our law, even if it's harsh for some individuals who haven't really committed any crimes. They technically are committing a crime by knowingly being in the country illegally, and I think they can, you know, get legal status. It takes a while, yes. It's a very difficult process. I'm not discounting that, but, you know, I think that that's necessary. I think law needs to be enforced. So that's my position.
Deportation can be a consequence of committing a civil offense, but also illegally immigrating in the U.S. anyway is a civil offense. So, I mean, that can result in deportation in some certain cases, like, for example, if you had a criminal record and you came here. But I think my question would also be, like, ways of enforcing immigration law, we would break immigration law as far as civil offenses can also include fines, can also include, like participation in, like, I don't know, civic programs and things like that. Like, it doesn't always have to be the case that people are deported.
I understand that. I understand that. Do you think when do you think deportation should happen? Like only in cases where someone commits a crime other than like a violent crime or whatever civil offense? When do you think deportation should be utilized? Do you think it should be ever?
Yeah, I think up to a point where somebody's like on a case by case basis, where they've been charged with committing a violent crime, in the United States especially, that's something that should be punishable by deportation. But like I said, that's something to be deliberated in a court of law, which in Tomar Garcia's case and in a few other cases as well, people are just being deported without due process or without the consideration of their case. Like, if somebody comes for political asylum, you obviously, or, like gang persecution, like you can't wait. It's kind of like a do or die situation. So.
Do you mind?
Sure, yeah.
Absolutely, sure. Thanks. Just a little context. It's my understanding that when Kilmar Abrego Garcia was actually given protected status, it was under the first Trump administration. So it was Donald Trump's administration that said this guy can stay here. So it's an interesting twist of things in terms of you're kind of overriding your own policy. That being said, I think to your point, and this is where, again, they're around everywhere, and believe it or not, some people still support it. The Constitution's a really cool thing because it protects a lot of different rights, at least theoretically. And one of the things that's in here is due process for all. It doesn't actually specify due process for citizens. And I think for some people, the concern about that case isn't that the guy might be scum. Maybe he is. I mean, personally, what it sounds like, he's not a guy I would invite over for a Christmas dinner. But he's entitled to due process. Because if that due process is denied for him, it's denied for you, it's denied for you, it's denied for me, it's denied for everybody. So I think that is, from my understanding, is a lot of people's concern. Not that this guy's going to be a Boy Scout troop leader, or that he should be held up as some model of virtue. The other point, you made a point, and I think we need to be careful about this one thing. You said that in El Salvador.
Yes.
Bukele,
Yes.
You're absolutely
Big
right.
supporter.
He has created incredible drops in crime. Absolutely. Gang violence has plummeted. Order in the street has also plummeted. There's a couple other people who did a really good job of that too. Joseph Stalin, Pol Pot, Adolf Hitler. My point is, you're absolutely right that those are results, but they're results that come with dictatorships or authoritarianism. And here's the thing, and this is the sad reality. If democratically elected officials that are Democrats with a big D, if they don't deal with crime, then real authoritarians will. Because you're absolutely right. Regular people don't want to be accosted by criminals. And a lot of people in Bukele's country are very grateful for it. But what cost does that bring? That's, I think, the philosophical thing. And, one of the dangers with the collapse of democracies is that if they're not working, people are going to go to strong men and authoritarians because they're going to offer solutions. You're absolutely right. Bukele's country is very safe for a lot of people, but it's not safe for anybody who disagrees with the government. It's not safe for anybody who might have a relative who's been swept up in a raid who maybe isn't in a gang. And so the question becomes, and this kind of goes back to the old Thomas Jefferson, I think it's Thomas Jefferson, I'm sort of paraphrasing, but it's better to let 10 guilty men go free than keep one innocent man in prison. That's the founding model of what our founding fathers said. They believed in law and order too, but they understood that tyranny can come in different forms, and often tyranny comes, and I'm not necessarily, and I want to be clear, I'm not equating Bukele with necessarily Stalin and Hitler. I'm just showing that there's a continuum here. And that if you're willing to give up certain rights and liberties in the name of security, you very often lose both eventually.
Sure, and this goes back to like Hobbes, as I had mentioned, with the Leviathan. I mean,
Yep.
if democracy, like they had a democracy in El Salvador, and they had a constitution and stuff, but it was completely meaningless because people couldn't walk to the store without getting like swept up by a gang and killed,
Yeah.
or murdered, or assaulted in some terrible, awful, horrendous way.
Sure.
And so they were living in a Hobbesian jungle where the worst of the worst was occurring. No one wanted to go to El Salvador. So Bukele comes in, currently at what, like 90% approval ratings, coolest dictator in the world. I mean, yeah, they're giant mega prisons. They swept up people off the street. I'm sure some innocent people went to jail too. But, you know, I mean, what's better? What's better? A society where it's basically like a jungle. You go out, you get killed by some gang member, or a society in which there's authoritarianism, there's a strongman leader who keeps you safe. You just can't really, like, you know, speak out against them. I think the second option is better. I don't think we shouldn't have this kind of system in America. We still abide by the Constitution. We should still have, you know, rights. I think that's a really important thing. Rights. Oh my gosh, Colin, you believe we should have rights? Whoa, yeah, I do. I think it's really important. And we should have freedom and democracy, all that. But in certain places, like in the case of El Salvador, you know, authoritarianism and strongman leadership is a better alternative.
I think, just to briefly respond, I think the issue is you're trading rule and fear from a gang into the bigger gangster, which is the government. And I think both end badly. And ultimately, it kind of proves that democracies tend to be rare historically, because it is, you're right, much easier to have dictators, authoritarians, tyrants that can give an easier solution. You know, Mussolini did make the trains run on time. He also threw a lot of people into camps, you know, and he also did things that led some of my ancestors to leave. So it is a long-standing historical debate. That's why you should all become history majors, or at least history minors. And it's not going to end tonight, but I see your points.
Okay. With that being said, I think we're finished.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
If you guys have any other topics that you would like to debate about, go ahead over to our Instagram page and
Doing all right,
comment on our most recent.
I'm doing good. How are you?
I want to stand on the chair.
Yeah, you know.
I gotta get a phone.
Get that dominance. You know, dominance.
I ain't gonna have it. He's so cold anyway. I ain't that kind of guy.
Now, here's the thing. Laptop died. I was recording 99%